Hello there, kia ora. Welcome to the Omnibus edition of whatever it is that I make. I really don't have a term for it. I should probably look into that. Each day, usually I put out a short video that's about 3 to 5 minutes long, looking at an individual issue or a wide range of issues that all have sort of one theme. And I've had a few people reach out and say to me that they'd prefer it if there was like an omnibus version of it, where it's all together at once, because everybody uses the internet and YouTube in different ways. So this is a YouTube exclusive, but it's not really new content if you've been watching the stuff from throughout the week. So it's all in one place if you need to be able to track down something relatively quickly, or you want to kill, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes time just getting yourself all depressed about everything that's going on in the world, which, kind of sad, really. So if you want to support what I'm doing, feel free to like, share, and subscribe with this video or any of the other videos. And if you want to financially support me, which I always appreciate, you can actually follow the links in the bio, which will take you to a PayPal page where you can do that. But no pressure, don't need to stress yourself about anything like that. It's just there if you feel like you want to do that. Anyway, let's jump into last week's Omnibus and let's have a bit of a recap of the week that was. There, kia ora. You may have heard that over the last couple of days, some of our local councils have been telling the government to go and stick it when it comes to speed limits outside of schools. The government decided that instead of having blanket speed reductions around schools, that they were just going to do it at certain points in time, because that's not less confusing at all. And a number of councils around the country have taken a look at the proposal from the government and told them to jog on. Not on the road though, where there are fast cars going. You see, most councils have actually done a lot of work when it comes to designing around speeds and safety features that go out in front of our schools. They are, after all, cornerstones of our community, where our youngest, most vulnerable people go. So the idea of keeping people safe there is really important. The work that goes into this kind of decision is absolutely massive, and it involves talking to locals in the school boards, community members from around the area, looking at what other infrastructure's in place in the area, as well as how much of a busy causeway it is towards the rest of the community or towards, say, larger arterial routes. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And one of the things that's most fascinating about it all is that, realistically, our laws and rules around how fast cars travel around schools come down to a really simple, immutable law. And I mean literally immutable law. It's Newton's third law of motion, that for every force that's exerted on one object by a second object, there's an equal in magnitude but opposite in direction, force by the second object on the first. So basically, when a really large 2.5-ton car meets a small squishy human, Newton says it's going to be bad, and it is. That's why there's so much work that goes into making sure that those areas are safe. And a lot of those safety features and safety rules are built around immutable rules like Newton's third law of motion, and the really real research that goes into just how much damage a difference between 5 and 10 kilometers can have on a human body if it gets hit by a very large non-human metallic body. But these people who get all upset and angry about this, well, they're quite willing to believe either the fact that whatever's in the headline is exactly how the news story presents things, or their vote for a National Act New Zealand First coalition is more powerful than Newtonian physics. I mean, I would love to see some of them try and prove that, but that's just what happens here. You see, confirmation bias is something that is really, really rampant when it comes to idealization of how we perceive policy that comes out. And this is a policy that the government, particularly Simeon Brown, has been really adamant about pushing. It doesn't matter what the research says, and all the research says the same thing. Slower speeds outside schools save lives. That doesn't matter, because you might want to be somewhere 20 seconds faster, and it's okay if a couple of kids, bump it along the way, as long as you get there on time. And that's how it feels when you hear them talking, Simeon and his party talking about the need to do this because Labour bad. But the reality of the matter is, the people who fall for this kind of bullshit because that's who they voted for, they're the ones who are dealing with a really strong form of confirmation bias. And there's almost nothing that we can do about it. You see, confirmation bias is one of the most pervasive forms of cognitive bias that we will ever come across, because it's our own and we don't like to admit that we're wrong. And part of it is admitting that, we're flawed, and nobody wants to admit that at all. So, when it comes to hearing people get up in arms and arguing around councils that shouldn't be getting all uppity in their place and knowing exactly what voters want, just remember that these are the people who choose not to read the story and get angry about the headlines, or if they do, are quite happy to let kids die so that they can justify voting for a government that will let kids die. Hello there, kia ora. Has anyone told the Prime Minister recently that he's not in the middle of an election campaign? Because he might want to take that on board before releasing videos that feel like election campaign videos. He actually put a video out yesterday where he's wandering around under some trees in an Auckland park like he's Sir Christian Cole hiding from Rhaenyra Targaryen's dragons, where he basically tried to tell us that he's Prime Ministering as hard as it's possible to Prime Minister because that's his job as Prime Minister. He doesn't justify not taking any portfolios because, that's what Prime Ministers do, but he does talk about his trip coming up to the United States where he's going to be meeting with heads of NATO, and that's fine. That's what we expect from our leaders, for them to represent us on the world stage in different ways. He also pointed out, though, this weird fact about the costs of living crisis.
Security and our prosperity for decades are under threat. And nowhere do we see that more starkly than in Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Now, closer to home, our neighbourhood is more complex, more chaotic and more challenging to navigate. And conflicts and instability overseas have worsened cost of living pressures here in New Zealand.
Which is weird, not because it's wrong, but because it's right, and he denied it during the election campaign. In fact, he and Nicola Willis were really specific during the election campaign, saying that the rate of inflation that we were dealing with was down to government spending, despite experts really quickly debunking that and pointing out that government spending, while in part slightly inflationary, also leads to an increase in our GDP, but things that actually are inflationary include tax cuts when the country can't afford them. Yeah, especially if they have to borrow for them. So yeah, who cares what the experts have to say when it's convenient for them, I guess. The timing for this video is also really kind of weird. Last week, the Prime Minister was dragged a little bit through the press because it turned out that he and Matt Ducey, the Minister for Mental Health, hadn't read the report on abuse in state care that got released in August last year. Now, the report was only sent to the Prime Minister's office officially last week, which kind of makes sense, but the interim report's been available for quite a while, and Matt Ducey had it sent to him directly in November. And it was discovered that he hadn't read it because he went to an event with the victims and he had to flub his way through and admit that he hadn't actually read this incredibly important report that implies some really bad things about the problems that show up with state care, like the fact that it could be a major driving force for about 90% of people who are currently in gangs, or that boot camps for children don't work. But again, evidence. Now, one of the things that also jumped up when he was being asked about this was just how big the report actually is. And yes, it is a big report because it's highly detailed. So there's lots of words in there. It's about 4 kilograms apparently. And yes, I know that's going to eat into his carry-on luggage because I'm sure the Prime Minister is going to be flying commercial because he promised us that he would do that. And that means he's only got limited carry-on luggage. But he also saves a whole bunch of space by not taking shampoo. So I reckon that he could probably take the report if he really wanted to and give him something to read on the 24-hour flight to the United States. But that's just me. But the important thing here to remember is that I'm not the Prime Minister. He kept reminding us that he is the Prime Minister in the middle of that weird campaign video, in the middle of a period where we don't have an election campaign. In a way, it feels like trying to justify what it is that he does for his job. And we have a pretty good idea as to what Prime Ministers do, because we've had quite a few Prime Ministers. At the same time, it also kind of feels like a way of justifying their exorbitant number of social media people. 7 on the social media team, remember? I guess they have to make the money somehow by wandering around in a park in Auckland, hiding from dragons. Oh, hey, while I've still got you here, Blake actually wanted me to pass on a message for you. You might have noticed Blake's been a little bit absent recently. That's because he spent most of the last 2 weeks in hospital. First, with a bout of the flu that's going around at the moment, and then secondly, with a bowel obstruction, which he had surgery for earlier in the week. He's doing fine, he's feeling much, much better, but he and his family wanted me to pass on to let everybody know what's been going on with him. And I want to use it as an opportunity to point out just how stressful a situation like this must be for the people around him. These are people who are supporting him all the time in a highly stressful situation while he's in hospital, dealing with a whole bunch of issues that only a hospital can help with because of the disabilities that he's got. And the government has the audacity to turn around and say that the people who are supporting him aren't entitled to a whole bunch of the things that they were entitled to before to help them manage themselves in such a high-stress period of time. So Blake, I'm glad that you're on the road to recovery, and I'm sure that many other people watching this feel the same way. Lots of love to you and your family. Get well soon, mate, and I'll talk to you when you get out of the hospital. Hello there, kia ora. You may recall during the election campaign there was at least one political party that used the slogan, "Let's get New Zealand back on track." Well, this week we got to see exactly how on track this country is going under this particular political party. It's going to be as on track as this new tram system that Auckland's going to be getting, the one that comes without tracks. You see, this government is, well, kind of ridiculous. There's a whole bunch of things that keep popping up that seem stupid, like this, telling criminals that crime's going to be made a criminal offence, essentially. They're putting them on notice that in November it's going to be tough. Like, criminals are going to be sitting there going through the Twitter feed of the National Party going, you know what? I'm not going to do crime anymore. Like I said, ridiculous. Or the budget blowout on the cancelled IREX ferry service, because everybody always knew that was going to be something that came back to bite the government in the arse, and that's essentially what's going to happen. Now they have to replace the ferries anyway, and it's going to probably end up costing them a little bit more than what they would have paid if they just kept onto the contract that they'd already agreed to. It's ridiculous and totally not on track. But the two big things that we saw come out this week that actually indicated how off track we are, well, they're all about numbers and statistics. You see, we saw a report come out this week that showed that 4,500 more people had signed up to the Job Seeker Work Ready benefit since May this year. Part of that driver is sort of funneling down and shrinking the public service, but there's other knock-on effects and other issues within the economy at the same time, because the Reserve Bank is trying to engineer a recession, and they've admitted that that's what they're doing. They've been working on it for quite some time. And for a recession to be effective, to do things like bring down inflation, that means we have to sacrifice a whole bunch of people to the almighty God of whatever the economy actually is. So yeah, 4,500 more people since May on job seeker benefit. But don't forget, this government has also announced that it wants to do everything it can to reduce the number of people on benefits, not by creating jobs and helping rebuild the economy. For that, you would need a competent finance minister. Instead, that means we're going to be looking at more punitive actions for people on job seeker benefits, or more ways of trying to fiddle them away somewhere else so it doesn't count as their overall job seeker benefit statistics. So that's a really good sign, I guess, for anybody who's supposed to be on a benefit, and that number is also supposed to increase significantly before the end of the year. Ooh. The other statistic that we saw that came out that showed just how on track the economy is, or the country as a whole, was the number of people that are leaving. Now, this is a preliminary result. It's going to take about 16 months to get the finalized results. But it showed that last month and the month before saw a net loss in migration for the first time since, well, there was one in 2022 when COVID restrictions lifted. And then the one before that was 2013 when John Key was in charge, and he created almost exactly the same conditions we're seeing right now that drove people overseas. Yet we lost more people to migration overseas than we gained. And that's a bad thing. Negative growth in the country due to migration is a bad thing. But that's just where we're at the moment, because we have an economy that's falling to pieces, because we have a country being run by somebody who doesn't know how to do the finances. It's just one great big cyclical issue. So yeah, when you keep being told that the country's getting back on track, just remember there's lots more people who are going to be unemployed and going to be punished for being unemployed, more people leaving the country than are coming into the country, and the government is still doing really stupid things, like instead of dealing with the cost of living crisis or fixing the economy, they're out there telling criminals that crime is going to be a bad thing for them to do and they should reconsider their lifestyle choices. Yeah, I'm sure things are really getting back on track. Hello there, kia ora. You may recall Andrew Bidder, who a couple of weeks ago as a Hamilton City Councillor got himself into a bit of hot water when he made a submission to the Waipā District Council about proposed changes to Cambridge's transport plans, where he lives. He doesn't live in Hamilton, where he represents people. His submission was very, very offensive, particularly to people in the disabled community, and it got a few people kind of worked up. Now, Andrew has a history of this kind of thing. He was actually on a couple of videos with Liz Gunn last year talking about how they're going to take over local governance and install people who are much more sympathetic to their particular way of seeing the world. He was also part of that sovereign citizen group, the Hamilton Residents and Ratepayers Association, who issued execution writs to other councillors while he sat in the audience and let them do that. So yes, stand up guy. Anyway, he's currently under investigation for code of conduct breaches, a lot of them being around that particular feedback that he gave to Waipā District Council. And Hamilton City Council's brought in an independent investigator to look into those. But Hamilton City Council Mayor and Waipā District Council Mayor Susan O'Regan and Paula Southgate, Paula for Hamilton, Susan for Waipā, have written to the Minister of Local Government and asked whether or not they could look into setting in an independent arbitration committee. And this is a really good idea, because it means that you've got a consistent process in place for every council when there is a possible breach of their code of conduct. It means that the regulations are the same for everywhere in the country and the expectations are the same for every elected official in the country. It's such a good idea. It was actually one of the recommendations that went into the Future for Local Government report that Simeon decided to throw out earlier this week. He decided that the report was completely useless because it was set up under Labour, and Labour bad. The report itself was actually set up because the Local Government Act is coming up 25 years old. It's no longer really fit for purpose. And some of the recommendations that they made included dropping the voting age on local councils to 16, ensuring that you've got an outside arbitration committee to deal with code of conduct complaints, restructuring councils so that they worked on a larger, more regional level that had better integration of things like Te Ao Māori and worked better with both iwi and kaupapa-based groups within various regions. It looked at different ways that they could include income and increase income and have consistent funding and help from local government and central government. It was huge. And they turned around at the government and said, nah, Labour bad. This was set up because of Three Waters, and we've fixed Three Waters by setting up Auckland Water Company Watercare to get sold off if it doesn't do its job. Yeah. So, Simeon's going to throw that out completely, the baby with the bathwater really, because there's a whole bunch of really good stuff in there. And while I can sort of understand that they were never going to allow 16-year-olds to go out and vote, the fact of the matter is something like an independent arbitration committee is a really good idea. And this report, because it had feedback from so many different organisations and councils and individuals like myself, I submitted to it. Apparently all that's for nothing. Wanting a better, more fit-for-purpose local government is not something that this government is really concerned about because, well, they might do something independent, like make decisions around Māori wards that this government is not a fan of having happen. Yeah. So unfortunately for Paula and Susan, chances are they're not going to get their outside arbitration committee, and Andrew Bidder is going to get a slap on the wrist with a wet bus ticket because that's pretty much how the system is set up at the moment, and it's not likely to change under this government. And we've still got another 18 months until we have a local body election to get rid of him. Hello there, kia ora. Look, I get a lot of people reaching out telling me that after a while my videos all seem to come across as kind of depressing because of all of the depressing things that are in them, and I totally get that. So I thought for the end of this week I would attempt to do something a little different and try and tell you about positive things that have been happening. And I'm not used to it. I've not tried it very often, so let's see how this goes. And I'm going to start with a really easy one. Blake wanted me to pass on a message to everybody. He's back home now and he's on the road to recovery. He wanted to thank everybody for the good wishes and the thoughts and prayers that were sent out to him, and he's hoping to be back at the wheel, as it were, trying to get things sorted within the next couple of weeks for both his campaign and other things that he's out there doing at the moment. So, glad to see that Blake is on the mend. See, look, happy news, positive news. Let's try it again. In Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, a bus stop outside their iconic Shearer's music store was recently updated. It went from this drab, boring, really depressing looking seat to this fantastic, thematically linked in, fully functioning bus stop with seat and a space for people for wheelchair access to be able to access the public transport system within the city. I like it. It's kind of cool. It's really neat to see how they've incorporated the musical theme there. Okay, I'm getting used to this. Right, let's try another one. New Zealand First MP Casey Costello has been forced to apologise for what they call a act contrary to law. It's not the same as breaking the law, but it goes against the spirit of the law that she was not following, which was around OIAs. After a couple of media organisations requested OIA information around policies that she put forward around freezing taxes on cigarette sales. But she still maintains she doesn't know how that managed to end up on her desk. Apparently there's some sort of mystery lobbyist just dropping things on MPs' desks in the hope that they become laws, but she did apologise for it, as she was ordered to by the Ombudsman. And that was before it was discovered that she'd actually withheld from Cabinet the fact that repealing those smoke-free laws would cost an extra $46 billion to the government and take even longer to reach their net zero smoke-free goals that they had in place. Okay, maybe that one didn't end on the most happy, positive note out there. All right, let's try another one, okay? There were reports that came out this week from Stats NZ that showed that the price of food is finally dropping for the first time in 6 years. The majority of the drop's actually been driven around a range of what we'd call staple foods, like tomatoes, fruit and vegetables, meat and poultry specifically are the big ones that have had the drops. So the food prices are bringing down. It's such a good thing that Judith Collins was already sitting there crowing about it. The same report did point out that every other area of food, the price is still going up. Olive oil, for example, has had the most increase of any kind of food group that we sell in our supermarkets. The cost of eating out also rose about 4%. It's also the third highest price index since they started recording these things in 1961. So overall, food prices actually increased about 1% in June compared with May. But over the last 12 months, they've gone down a little bit. That data set that they released as well also pointed out that transport and accommodation prices are still going up. They showed an 11.6% increase for transport over the last 12 months, despite a drop of about 4.5% over the last month. It also saw a 4.5% increase in rents over the last year. You know, that downward pressure really doing its job. Okay, so maybe this wasn't the best idea of a good news story. So, sorry. Okay, how about this one? This one I think you're going to enjoy. Gay furry hackers have stolen data from a right-wing think tank in the United States around something called Project 2025. For those of you that don't know, Project 2025 is basically a handbook that this institute has organized. That's a guidebook for whoever is the next Republican president to go in and change a whole bunch of things to be more like how they want it. Essentially, it would get rid of people being hired because of how good they are at the job and make sure that they're politically neutral, and instead put in people who are loyal to a specific president to be able to get through the policy changes that they want to get through, which include weaponizing things like a woman's right to choose abortion. So yeah, I'm sure that went really well. But all the data that they had, well, it was stolen by a hack that was organized by a group of gay furries, which just feels like the most American comedy news headline ever, but it kind of makes you smile because it just does. Yeah, it's brilliant. Okay, that's my attempt at good news this week. I don't know how well I did. I probably could have done a little bit better, but good news is actually really hard to find. If you check out the algorithms that are feeding you your news stories as well as what's actually on our news sites, you'll see that there's a lot of negativity and a lot of drama and conflict, and that's deliberate because that's what people go out there and read. Finding good news stories is not always an easy thing to do because that's not how we consume media, and it's not what draws clicks and draws eyeballs, which is how our news media makes their money. So if you do come across something good, savor it, enjoy it, relax and try and take it in the moment, because it shows that the world is not all falling to pieces out there. Sometimes good things do happen, and sometimes we have to make our own good things happen. And sometimes you need to end the week on a relatively positive note, because otherwise it can get all kind of depressing. So that's it for this week's Omnibus. There'll be another one probably next Sunday sometime. I haven't decided on a schedule yet. I'll work it out. I'm making this up as I go along. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell people about the videos, and make sure that you're being kept aware of everything that's going on at the moment, because there's a lot going on at the moment.